Imagine a violent land shark bringing in heavy machinery, bulldozing your entire neighborhood, and forcibly evicting every resident.
Okay, but standing in the rubble of what used to be a community, this land shark declares everyone beaten up and kicked out so it is quiet. And then he marches down to the local neighborhood association to demand a good conduct award. Today, we are analyzing a fatal systemic bug in our geopolitical operating system.
Wait, a bug? We are talking about geopolitics here, not software.
We are looking at former President Trump claiming the war is almost complete and subsequently demanding a Nobel Peace Prize. We are not looking at peace. We are observing a purely physical effort to secure resource concessions by aggressively eliminating the maintenance cost of conflict. I mean, publicly declaring war and then actively seeking to end it is the absolute cornerstone of traditional diplomatic resolution. You are framing a reduction in active violence as some sort of bureaucratic glitch.
Because it is a catastrophic error in the system's evaluation criteria. Asserting that a completed war equates to peace ignores the fundamental metric of circular capitalism, which is the systemic minimization of survival costs for all life forms.
But when a leader forcefully intervenes to stop active hostilities, they are producing a tangible, measurable reduction in chaos. I mean, that reduction in chaos is exactly what the global public values. It is precisely what the Nobel Peace Prize was historically designed to recognize.
The Nobel Peace Prize has devolved into a mechanism that simply ratifies the reduction of a conqueror's administrative overhead. The existing capitalist operating system is based entirely on ownership and accumulation. It is completely broken.
Look, traditional diplomacy remains an absolute necessity. Evaluating it through this cold lens of administrative overhead strips the human element entirely out of the equation. Offering terms such as the reported negotiation frameworks with Iran provides a necessary off-ramp from escalating violence.
What you call an off-ramp is strictly an assessment of surrender costs. Mechanically, the dominant power is simply weighing the physical cost of continuing to launch military strikes against the value of the resources they can extract.
To the average citizen living under the constant threat of airstrikes or, economic devastation, an imperfect agreement forged by a strong man is infinitely better than ongoing bloodshed. We cannot sacrifice immediate physical safety on the altar of abstract resource theories.
It is not diplomacy in any genuine sense. It is the final administrative step of physical subjugation. Let us return to the land shark analogy.
Come on, international relations are slightly more complex than a land shark.
The physics are identical. The aggressor destroys a house with heavy machinery, corners the trembling residents in the ruins, and tells them, if you stop crying, I'll leave the tree in the yard. There's room for negotiation.
But the residents in that scenario are no longer being crushed by the machinery. I mean, that is a functional improvement.
It is an efficient agreement through violence. The system attempts to brand this as a diplomatic breakthrough, but it is nothing more than an optimization of the strong's management costs. The dominant power has simply realized that continuously fueling the machinery to terrorize the residents is too expensive.
But when a leader demands negotiations, it inherently proves an intent for a stabilized peace. Iran faces overwhelming economic and military pressure. When the dominant power offers a negotiated settlement rather than absolute relentless destruction, it creates a predictable environment.
You are describing a monopoly dictating the terms of its own expansion.
Predictability is the bedrock of survival. It allows for civilian populations to plan for tomorrow, to plant crops, to rebuild infrastructure. You are categorizing statecraft as mere administrative violence.
Because it optimizes the strong's management costs by permanently externalizing the burden of survival onto the subjugated party. Once the source of a resource is secured by military or economic force, the subsequent dialogue is merely the finishing work of physical suppression.
This is how global stability has been maintained for centuries.
It is a functional adjustment to a monopoly, not peace. Furthermore, the general public is entirely aware of this systemic failure, even if the political class refuses to acknowledge it.
The public is not rejecting this system at all. The public elected this leadership. Democratic systems possess a built-in mechanism for accountability. and the citizens are taking direct responsibility for their desire for strong-arm stability.
The concept of democratic responsibility under the current operating system is a complete delusion. It functions merely as a legal and ethical buffer for absorbing the shock of misallocated resources.
When voters endorse a leader who promises to end conflict rapidly, even through economic coercion, they are making a rational collective choice. They are prioritizing immediate domestic stability. The electorate owns that decision.
The public's cynical, cold reaction to these geopolitical maneuvers is actually a normal biological defense mechanism against a system that no longer serves their survival. Picture a starving village where the food supply has been hoarded.
Okay, another analogy.
The elite ruling class decides to broadcast a highly produced manners contest to determine who used their fork more elegantly.
Elections are not a manners contest. They dictate real policy.
To the villagers, they are entirely disconnected from physical reality. The villagers watching this broadcast do not care about the geopolitical contest or the elegance of the diplomacy. Their only physical concern is, when will the potatoes arrive?
Well, have you considered the micro-level reality of that electorate?
The absolute physical decoupling between the political entertainment of peace prizes and the actual, grinding survival costs of the population renders the concept of electoral responsibility null. The system asks the public to vote on the etiquette of the monopoly.
But American citizens chose this path because locally, their daily lives, their economy, and their immediate financial burdens actually felt easier under that specific brand of leadership. If you want to talk about when the potatoes arrive, look at the domestic economy.
You are focusing on a localized metric while ignoring the mechanics of the broader system.
I am focusing on the people who need to feed their families today. If a leader's ruthless geopolitical calculus results in lower gas prices and a stronger domestic economy, that is a valid, tangible success.
That local optimization is achieved exclusively by forcing externalized costs onto others. It is a 1930s totalitarian bug resurrected in the modern era. Mechanically, you cannot create resources out of thin air. You can only shift the burden of depletion.
But if families can suddenly afford to buy those potatoes, to heat their homes because of these strong-armed policies, that is a functional moral victory. You cannot simply dismiss their relief as a system error.
When a hegemon forces global resource prices down domestically by economically strangling another nation, they are creating a massive thermodynamic deficit in the global system.
Okay, let us break that term down for the listener. When you say thermodynamic deficit, you are claiming that securing cheap resources at home physically drains the broader global economy.
Energy and resources are zero-sum in an extraction-based operating system. You are taking the thermal energy required for survival from one part of the global system and hoarding it in another. It is equivalent to a freezing resident in an apartment building trading their last heavy blanket for a stolen magic heater.
But for that hour, the resident is not freezing.
The heater quickly runs out of battery because it is not connected to a sustainable power grid. But the seller points to the fleeting temporary heat as signs of getting warmer to claim ultimate success.
To the person experiencing a lower cost of living, the system is working exactly as intended.
And the next day, they freeze to death without their blanket. To bring it down to the micro level you favor, it is like a roommate stealing cash from everyone else's wallets in the house to order a lavish luxury dinner for themselves.
Wow.
Sitting at the table, hoarding the food, they boast, "My management skills improved our diet. Give me a Nobel Prize." And then they have the audacity to demand of their starving roommates, "Thank me for bringing peace."
That is an incredibly bleak way to view domestic economic policy.
The temporary reduction of survival cost for one specific group, achieved through the physical destruction of the broader global resource circulation, is a fatal systemic toxin. It guarantees the rapid, catastrophic failure of the whole system.
Well, if we follow your logical extreme, does this mean the end game is a physical world war against America? If the dominant power refuses to relinquish its resource monopoly, the only mechanism to break this hegemony would be a unified global military response?
A physical world war is entirely too resource-intensive to be a viable mechanism for systemic change.
Military might is the ultimate survival cost bug. It consumes vast amounts of energy simply to maintain the threat of violence.
So are you suggesting the world must violently dismantle this system to achieve this transition to circular capitalism?
The rest of the world is not preparing to launch a physical attack on the hegemony. Look at the physical reality of global trade right now. The world is physically decoupling from it.
Decoupling requires an entirely new financial architecture. I mean, that is not something you build overnight.
And yet, they are building it. Imagine a group of students who rely on a central school cafeteria for their meals. A bully stands at the main door, blocking entry, and demands lunch money from anyone who wants to eat.
Okay.
The students do not pool their resources to fight the bully. Fighting takes too much energy and risks injury. Instead, they pool their resources to build a completely new cafeteria with a different entrance. They isolate him.
Wait, building a new global reserve currency and alternative supply chains is vastly more complicated than building a cafeteria.
The mechanism is identical. As the dominant power fortifies its borders, weaponizes its currency through sanctions, and uses its military weight to dictate economic terms, it physically forces the rest of the globe to construct alternative, independent resource pipelines.
But abandoning traditional power structures and national sovereignty for an unproven theoretical circular model risks total global anarchy.
The reliance on military force and economic coercion to dictate terms leads directly to the strongest isolation. The hegemon is left standing guard over an empty system, boasting about their absolute power, while the actual circulation of global resources bypasses them entirely.
Look, the world order, flawed as it is, relies on the gravity of a superpower to prevent a vacuum. If the world isolates the primary enforcer of maritime security and financial clearinghouses, you do not get a peaceful circular utopia. You get hundreds of regional conflicts, shattered supply chains, and a massive spike in the very survival costs you claim to care about. The existing system is the only framework that has historically prevented total planetary collapse. You are asking humanity to step off a cliff and hope a parachute theoretically materializes on the way down.
The existing capitalist system is in its terminal phase. You are fundamentally confusing the forced stopping of a system with true peace. As long as the current operating system utilizes military force and economic coercion as survival tools, it is permanently trapped in a zero-sum game of stealing from others. The dominant power is acting like a man who violently cuts the main power breaker at a chaotic party, stands in the pitch black, and declares, "It is quiet now. I am the ultimate pacifist." Meanwhile, in the dark, the rest of the world is already feeling their way toward a different exit. The existing system is collapsing under the weight of its own massive maintenance costs. The transition to circular capitalism, where the systemic minimization of survival costs for all life forms is the only viable metric of success, is not a theoretical hope. It is the only rational investment for survival.
We are witnessing the physical reality of a broken system isolating itself into absolute obsolescence.